So welcome everybody once again to this webinar on Chatbot CI/CD. So this is Aditya here. Now the agenda, the story so far, what have we been doing with this? Then CI/CD specifically in terms of chatbots. Then basically what are the fault lines, as in the way to build an effective pipeline or an effective CI/CD is to understand what are the different areas and where bottlenecks can happen. So we will get a quick overview of that. And then how do we build a possible pipeline? What are all the different aspects or things that we need to consider? And we will also look at Rasa and what all provisions Rasa basically gives to make all this CI/CD possible with a chatbot. So this is how we will proceed. So the story so far, this is the third webinar of the chatbot series, one building on the top of the other. The first one we discussed about just an overview of chatbot and an NLU, natural language understanding. So at that point, we got exposed to the concept of Turing test, and then how has the chatbot architecture evolved. And then a chatbot, when we say natural language understanding, that basically does intent capture and entity extraction and then build responses on the top of it. Yeah. And then we moved on to, in the second session, we spoke about chatbot success and the key points. So there we basically looked at what are the business considerations that comes into building of a chatbot. We also looked at the business funnel from the user coming till the capture of an action. And then the technical considerations wherein we discussed about, so how do we build a bot of bots, and then basically different life cycles that come there. So today we will delve a little deeper into this aspect of it, wherein we will try to understand from a component perspective, from a different segments perspective about what extra points will be there when we talk about chatbot CI/CD. So if you want to access, to this webinar, attending the previous two sessions is definitely a plus point, but then it is not really a necessary condition. So if you just understand that, okay, chatbots have been overused, basically. There have been anything and everything is a chatbot if you have a conversation UI to it. But specifically talking about chatbots which have natural language understanding, which basically create models and we use those models. So those kind of chatbots, which are conversational chatbots. So if you just know the overview of it, then that is more than enough to follow what we discuss in today's webinar. But even otherwise, if you are interested to go through the previous webinars, if you access our website, aritha.com, and go into events, so there are these two places where you can go through. There is also a recording of it available in each of these pages. So you can go in there and then you can go to the recording of this webinar and you'll be able to have a quick run through with it. Yeah. Okay. And then in the first webinar also we had, I had shared a GitHub repository, which basically was a chatbot to fetch movie posters. Yeah? That was what we had demoed in the first webinar also. So yeah, I'll also use the same thing today when we talk about different aspects of CI/CD and go through the different parts of what a chatbot contains. Yeah? So that's how we will build up to this. We'll dig a little deeper into what is here. So with that, any questions that you have, as Amrita already told you, you can put it in the Q&A, and at right point, I will either pick it up or Amrita will prompt me when there is a question at the right point of time, and then we can build our understanding from there on. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so basically, if you think about CI/CD, we have been doing CI/CD setups for quite a long time now. So software really understand application development, and so you need to have, whether we implement that right or wrong is a secondary aspect, but at least now we are in such a state wherein everybody understands a CI/CD with a software application. So you check out code from a repository, you build it, you deploy it, you run some tests, and then say whether the build is good to go or not, and then promote it to different environments. Yeah. So we have been doing that. So now let us try to draw parallels between what would happen when we had a regular application and we talk about an application CI/CD versus what extra we have when we consider chatbot itself. Yeah. So basically, we come across three different life cycles. When I say life cycle, a software development life cycle. So for example, I mean, those three life cycles would basically be the application life cycle. The application life cycle is basically wherever your chatbot sits. Yeah? So it might sit as a Slack bot, it might sit as a bot on Facebook, or it might sit as just on your website, you have given a UI and then people interact with your chatbot. Yeah? So that is one part of it. And that as a regular software application that has its own life cycle. And then comes when you train the model. Yeah? This is where the NLU component of chatbot comes in, the natural language understanding. So training of the NLU model. So what all CI/CD aspects can come into picture here. This is a slightly different bit from what happens in a CI/CD for an application. And the third comes about the actual chatbot itself. Yeah? So I want to draw a slight differentiation between training of a model and the chatbot. That's because training of the model, we are basically talking about these things. Yeah? Figuring out the test data, what is the intent, how do I understand the entity, and all those things. But the chatbot also has to facilitate a conversation. And to facilitate that conversation, it has to take some business actions, or it has to, maybe it connects to our business database and then fetches some report and shows that report somewhere, or maybe fetches a product and asks the user to buy for that product or subscribe to a newsletter. So it could have been anything for that matter. So this chatbot, the third point that I stood, is something which facilitates that kind of a conversation to happen. So again, three different things: the application, the UI, which actually helps you to converse with a chatbot. The second is the model, which basically has the data and the test data that is required, and what we call as a storyboard, which basically says how a conversation should proceed when we are trying to use a CI/CD application. And then we have the actual chatbot itself, which is the basic, the one that is basically linking the business logic with the training model, and how do we evolve it. Yeah? So when I spoke about the agenda of it, so we discussed about fault lines. So to build a good CI/CD system, which is evolving continually, which is improving continually, we definitely need to understand the different lines or the domain lines that you would need to draw, and then manage each of that area separately. And that's how you can actually say that you have considered this software. I have covered the end-to-end of the CI/CD there. Now let us look at what all that really entails. So when I talk about fault lines, if you look at chatbot from a very high level, so it's just conversation in, then the chatbot does some magic behind it, and then it's the conversation out. Yeah? But if you dig a little deeper into it, from the chatbot, so the UI part of it, we can consider the UI part of it as a regular software by itself. Why I say that is, it is very easy to demarcate, or it is very easy to decouple a chatbot from the UI. We can make that happen by many of the chatbot providers. They expose the chat endpoints as REST APIs. So as soon as you do that, so now the chatbot can run as any of your REST APIs, and all the UI need to do is call these REST APIs continually, and then show the responses, whatever the user types in, take that payload, send it to this REST API, that talks to the chatbot, and then chatbot replies back with a message, and then the UI shows it. As soon as we do this, the UI becomes a regular software application, which can be managed and it can be incrementally built just like any other software there. So we use Rasa, even Rasa, I mean, as an example here. So we are using Rasa, and Rasa also enables, provides you a way in which you can enable REST APIs. And these REST API, the authentication can happen through JWT tokens, or the authentication can also happen through just a regular API key-based authentication. And then just like how you would have used any other servers, you can also use a chatbot as soon as you expose it as a REST API. So all the color changes, how should my buttons look, and then when should it refresh, and all those things you can just manage that as if you had managed any other web front for any other software for that matter. So that's one of the demarcations that we need to figure out. The next comes the training data. Yeah? So the training data itself needs to be managed like code. Why I say that is, so it's not just some data or a data dump that is sitting somewhere, but any chatbot that you pick, they expect data to be in a certain format. They expect data to be in certain structure. Yeah? So to maintain that structure, we need to maintain training data as code itself. What do I mean by that? I will just show that to you. I think I have a question. Yeah, so the question says, how do we test automatically? Okay, so to answer this, I have a couple of slides when we come to that, and I'll also show you, and I'll also show you the commands that are available and how do we make that test happen. Yeah? So testing in a CI/CD system is very, very crucial, but here the testing has one more extra step to it, an interesting aspect. We'll discuss that once I come to that part of it. So it will be covered. Thanks for that question. Yeah. So now if you look at the GitHub repository that I had shared, now I'll actually jump between what I want to demo versus how the slides are going through, so that we can connect them as we go through it. Yeah. So now this was the link. Poster boy was our. We had put the data and some amount of action associated with it. And this also contains some amount of README for you to get started on it. So people who had attended the first webinar, they would have seen this in action. But then just to think about it, so this poster boy chat application for people who are not there. So it opens up a chat conversation, and then in the chat conversation, you ask for a movie poster, and then it just serves up a movie poster, yeah, or at least a link to that movie poster. Yeah? So now in this, so there is this data, and this is how Rasa is trying to maintain this data. Yeah? But then other chatbot applications might maintain data separately, but this is one way, and I'll also tell you how extra we can manage this. Now, if you look at it, there is basically, this has some kind of a JSON structure, and then it actually helps us to figure out what is the text, intent, and entities. So now we have to manage this test data itself, apart from keeping it in the Git repository. So there are a couple of ways in which we can manage this data. One of the ways is Rasa itself gives us something called as Rasa X. For that matter, many chatbot frameworks actually help us do it. So this Rasa X itself, through Rasa X interface itself, it helps you to take that, it helps you to construct this training data. And once you have constructed the training data, you can always keep checking it into your GitHub repository. So this is one training data. You see that there's a structure to it. A second way to do this is, you can also move this training data, not just a JSON file. If the data is very, very huge, you can actually move this JSON file itself into either a RDBMS, a relational database system, or still better, you can just dump it into a NoSQL, a non-relational database like MongoDB. So dump that in, and then you can write an interface which basically gets the data, and then the data can be managed that way. So either you keep it in a JSON file which is read by it, or you keep it into a no structured database, and then you feed it from there. but then yes, so special attention and special focus needs to be there to manage the training data itself as code. Yeah? So one of the important aspects of it. Yeah. So so now corrections to training data, we will also see how this happens when we go to the demo part of it. So Rasa provides a way in which you can basically correct this training data and manage that conversations. Yeah? So now what you see here is the way the training data will get continually improved or will get continually developed is a separate aspect, completely different from the way your application actually develops. Yeah? So that is one aspect to it. We'll see a few of things there. And then the second, the third part to this is now, okay, the training data will help you collect some data, and it will also help you build some stories. Yeah? So the stories are basically, it basically tells how do you go about handling a conversation. So if there is a greet and somebody is asking for a poster and then you say goodbye, so that's stories, right? So apart from that, it will not just be static data, right? So always you will have to understand the message that is coming in, figure out what is the intention of the user, maybe capture some information along the way, and then you have to trigger some of your business activity. You have to trigger some of your business code. Yeah? This can be as complex or as simple as you want to be. Yeah? So this business action can actually be deployed as a completely different server by itself. And all these business actions can basically connect to a much bigger system, collect the data, and then reply back with the exact data that the user wants. So this becomes slightly different from the data, because whoever is creating the data, they will not really be worried about how do I do these business actions. Yeah, so because they expect that, okay, say for example, you have developed a chatbot for your HR organization, and the HR executive wants to figure out somebody coming to your platform and somebody is asking, how do I apply, or is there a job opening in your organization, right? So then the HR executive who is managing this chatbot will think that the developers have somehow written some business action which they have to call, which they have to figure out what to call, that's all. So that is why exposing a separate interface to train the data and handling the business actions as if it was regular software applications becomes a very important aspect there. Yeah? So with respect to Rasa itself, if you look at it in Rasa provides you a way, and they call it as actions. It's an extendable framework basically. And in actions, you basically say what you do when somebody is asking for a poster. And here, if somebody is asking for a poster and it has figured out what is the movie name, then it basically hits an external API called as OMDB API, sends the movie name and gets back the poster, and then replies back with the poster. Yeah? So this, if you see here, it is written in Python because Rasa is built on Python. The SDKs of Rasa are exposed through Python. But then you can consider this as just a hook, right? So in this hook, you can in turn call your own REST API where you have some other Java written REST API that is running, and then get back the result and then show the result back, basically making it a lot more decoupled and a lot more asynchronous in its nature, in which it connects and it returns back. So to that question of, if I have to use Rasa, do I need to know all of my logic is built on Java? Would I need to know Python? No, just use this as a hook and then call your Java as if you would have called any other Java API service, and then you can build from there. So this is one more activity where you have to maintain all this data. I think there is a couple of questions. Let me pick that. So do we have accelerators for knowledge management? Maybe you may want to elaborate on it, but what Rasa basically does, Rasa X and even Dialogflow and many of them basically, they give us very easy to use interfaces wherein I can create conversations, use those conversations to train my bot. and also monitor different conversations and mark the conversation as which the system knows, which the system doesn't know, or flag a particular conversation so that you can build it further. Yeah, so that way you can do something. Pre-domain intents. Actually, there are no automatic pre-domain intents available, but then yeah, I see a point there. Yeah, maybe it is possible to build a lot of pre-domain intents along with it and then manage that. It is possible, but one of the ways for you to do that would be to build a proper a training data set which will help you to figure out the intents of it. Yeah? So nowadays, because of a lot of usages of chatbots, there are a lot of intents available in terms of greet, in terms of frustration, in terms of exit, in terms of when you go to different domains, specifically a bit of sentimental analysis, if you have to analyze what mood somebody came in with. So those kind of domain-specific things are available to it. Yes. So NLU engine for all conversational. Does Aritha use Rasa as NLU or NLP engine for all conversational AI services? Yes. So Rasa we are using for one of our clients, which has a huge knowledge database, and then we are converting that into a chatbot, and that is built on conversational AI services. But the trick here is, I mean, because you brought up that conversational AI service, the trick here is at some places you will have to do a handhold in terms of you cannot give the option of running away with the conversation to the end user. I mean, if it's a general conversation, right? Say something like you have built something like Siri or something like Alexa, which is very, very generic in its nature. So then it is okay. You can handle a lot of stuff there. But then if it is a business need that you are actually solving, then at certain places where you think that the user might run away with the conversation or really take it in a different direction, then it is also possible to expose some buttons or some form activity to the user, in the sense that, see, for example, see if you are a pizza house and then you ask the pizza you ask the user what kind of a pizza you want, right? You don't want the user to answer saying, I want idli vada, right? Because that's definitely, then how do you handle that conversation? So at that point, it is better to say, choose one of the below pizza items and then specifically give him the options telling, so I want a thin crust pizza, a wheat crust pizza, and things like that, right? So conversational AI, for a large extent we have, but where you think you want the user to drive, you want the conversation to drive in a particular area, then you can expose form actions, and those form actions will basically tell that. So we have a combination of conversational things and a combination of form-based elements, which basically drives the whole conversation there. So hopefully that answers the question. And then there is one more question which says, is there any tool available to measure the correctness of training model? Yes, it is there. I will come to that when I answer that. Okay, cool. Perfect. And then let me take this out. Yeah, I was here. Okay. And then the next thing is an interesting thing here, and a clear separation we also need to consider is the NLU model. So now, chatbot training data and the model, there needs to be some differentiation. That is, managing the training data itself is about how do you figure out your conversations and how do you mark those conversations in the way you want. But then once you have that data, and then when you run it through your chatbot conversational engine, that basically creates a model which basically is, understands the natural language, So that kind of a model, it's a NLU model is a common terminology used, but basically it can be a pipeline within. So if you have worked with ML applications, when you're building a model, you can actually build a pipeline of it, as in the data basically flows through different algorithms before a final decision is made. So this chatbot basically creates that kind of a model, and we take that and we need to know how to manage this model itself. So what do I mean by that is, okay, so today I had some training data, I created a model out of it, and then I deployed that model. But then very quickly I figured out that, no, this is not the model, something is wrong with this, and the chatbot is not behaving the way it should. I should have a way to basically version my models and roll back to a better model if I figure out that something is wrong, right? So now an important aspect to note here is training data has not changed. My business action has not changed. My REST API continues to work. All I need is the previous model for me to continue the rollback or something like that, right? So a chatbot system should also provide a way in which you handle this NLU models separately. Okay, now a couple of questions were based on this. Now, after bringing in all these things into place, we would also need to bring in test cases to validate whether the data is correct, whether the conversation is correctly happening, and that becomes a very important activity. So here I want to draw a clear differentiation between, if you are considering the UI of this chatbot as any other software application, then you would bring in some amount of tests for that application. Yeah. So you would either use Selenium, or you would use unit test cases, or depending on what you have created, you would have your own test cases built on the part of this application. Similarly, if you think about this business action, these business actions are also basically deployed as a server by itself. And the job of this business action is, whenever somebody hits, reply back with an action, with a reply, right? With a reply which is basically business proprietary knowledge. So the test cases that you write here would be the test cases for your business action. But so I assume that because we are at a state wherein we understand software deployments perspective, so I assume that you all know how to write test cases for a web UI, you all know how to write test cases to a REST API server. But here I'm talking about test cases to a chatbot application itself. Why this is important is for two things. One, you should understand that, when you run these test cases, you need to get an understanding from the chatbot that because I introduced further training data, I'm not expecting any other previous conversations to fail. Yeah? So you need to have that understanding. And also, sometimes when you are actually building a lot of stuff, right, then the intent, sometimes there might be a confusion of intent that happens. Yeah? Say, for example, if somebody asks you, are you hungry? You would answer yes. And if somebody asks you, do you want a pizza? You would still answer yes. The intent there is an affirmation intent, but you're using that in different contexts. Right? So when you have many such intents that are there, the chatbot might get confused about what are you trying to talk. Right? So for those kind of things, you will need to figure out whether your intents are correct or your intents are wrong. So that is one part of the test cases that you run for a chatbot. And the second thing is, and the second important thing is, now you had a previously working model. Now you are bringing in a new NLU model because you changed your data and then you have retrained your chatbot. You need some kind of an accuracy measure between your new model versus your old model. Yeah. So here we discussed about that, right? Model needs to be versioned and we should be able to pick and choose a better model. So for that, there should be a way for me to figure out, when compared to the previous model, how does the accuracy of my current model look at? So two different interesting aspects about testing a chatbot. One is testing the validity of the training data. 2 is testing the accuracy of your model as compared to your previous model. Yeah. So an interesting thing, I'll start to show these things when we go there. Yeah. So now let me go to my setup that I already have here. Let me just bring this up. I think there are a couple of questions there. So there is a question which says, in continuation to the tools question, do we have any automation tool for chatbot testing? So I will show you a couple of things that comes inbuilt with Rasa itself. But if we are talking about Rasa perspective, there is something called as bottlenecks, which actually gives extra testing tools on the top of Rasa itself. Anyways, I'll show you the testing things that that already comes with Rasa, and then maybe you can have a follow-up question with that. Yeah. All right. So now, so what I have basically done is basically taken the same Git repository that I had there, and then of course there have been some changes on the top of it, but that's the same repository. And then now let us go through the different aspects of it. So I told that we have all these different training data that is available to us. So that data is under this data folder. So there is a JSON and there is stories associated with it. And all the business related code is present under actions. I have to be a level higher. Okay. So under this actions. So this is just the hook. Yeah. So from here you can go to anywhere you want. And then, so if you look at this test, so there is a test folder also available to us wherein I can drop in my test, and then it can tell whether the test succeeded or whether the test failed. So if you look at, I'm showing you a Rasa setup, but any other chatbot you pick, it will be very similar to what is happening here too. Yeah? So now if I say, if I open this test there, so now the test basically has a conversation which you are expecting to happen. Yeah? So somebody says greet, and then it does something, and then there is something, and then there is goodbye. Yeah? So you write multiple such tests here, and then you say whether these tests worked or not. Yeah? So you are maintaining tests as if they're code by themselves. But I told you there are two aspects to it. One is figuring out the conversation, and then figuring out whether the training data is correct. And the third part is figuring out the accuracy of it. Yeah. So I will run them, and I will also show how they look at it. Right. So now if you look at so now first let me bring up first let us train it. Yeah. So first let us train it, and then let us see what happened to that model generation. So all these different commands together will basically become your CI/CD. Yeah. So you can tie that CI/CD up with any tool for that matter. Yeah. So now let me say, now I say Rasa train. This is the training command of Rasa, which is basically taking the data and then it is running it to train it. Yeah. Okay, because there was nothing changed. Yeah. So it basically, I'm not sure if this is well visible. I just changed the background so that white is better. But what it's basically telling me is nothing changed, and you can use the old model stored at this location. So what Rasa has done is every time you train it, what we called as a software model, so all that is present to us under, now if I say, if I go to this directory called models, you see that there is a model already available to me for me to use. Yeah. So the furthermore changes I make to the data, there will be much more models available to it. Yeah. So let me see if I can trigger something like that. So let me see, let me go to data. Yeah. I'm just changing the code directly, but maybe you will use better tools. I'll show you what tools are available anyways. So let me delete this. I just wanted to think that, okay, there has been some change. That's all. What happened here? Go out. Yeah. Okay. I just removed one. I don't think it will harm it much, but I just wanted to create another model, that's all. Yeah, now you see that previously it said that nothing had changed, so it is kind of idempotent. Yeah. So if the data has not changed, it won't go about recreating it. If you have used tools like Puppet, Chef, and Ansible, they're idempotent. If the environment has already changed or it matches the change that you want, they don't redo the change. Yeah? So similarly here, previously when the data was not changed, it did not retrain it. It was idempotent. Now it has created a new model. And now if I go to this models thing, yeah, now you see that there are two models available to us. So keep in mind about this. And maybe once we go back and when I show you the Rasa X, you will be able to choose between these two models that are available. So that is one aspect to it. So once you have trained the model, the next thing is, so now linking it back to the slide deck we had. So we had training data. We changed the training data, and then we created the NLU model. The business action was already available to us as action. And this business action itself runs as a server so that you can manage that separately. So now let me start that server. So now I say Rasa run actions. Yeah. Okay. So now you see that an action endpoint is up, and it is up on some URL. You can actually basically expose it on any URL that you want. But then because my action server and the Rasa chatbot will run on the same box, for me localhost is okay for me. So what it basically means is that I want to clearly draw the difference between the chatbot itself and the action server. Yeah? So now the action server is already running for us, but the chatbot is still not running. So when I run the chatbot and whenever a conversation happens, if required, the chatbot will know which application server to talk to, which business server to talk to, and then get the data from there. So I have brought up this action server there, and now let us run the actual chatbot. Let me see if there's a question at this point. Yes. So okay. So there is one more question which says, while this comes up, I'll take that question. So assume one model is identified running perfectly. Now I would like to add more questions, or my queries need to change. Will there be an impact? Exactly, yes. So now what we are basically doing by changing, adding more questions or adding more intents basically is, we are creating more stories. Yeah? We are creating more training data. So when we do that, we have to retrain our model. That's exactly what I did just to generate one more model, wherein I went in and changed the test data, right? So that was basically indicating that I deleted something. I was effecting a change. That was what I was doing. So training the model is a constant activity that you keep doing. So you train the model. Once you train the model, you get a new model, figure out if that is the right model to be used. That I will show in the next section, and then you'll be able to switch between those two models there. Okay, so there's one more question which says, now that I have two models, which model it will use, latest or both? We can basically choose the models, but by default, it uses the latest created model there. Yeah. So now this Rasa X itself has given me a URL, but it's just a localhost URL. I'll just change that a little. I want the actual server URL there. Okay, so I'll just change this. So now, by running Rasa X, so we are moving on to that aspect. So don't worry about this. The password is not complete, so it's not a leak of data. All right. Yeah. So now, by putting this up, so what Rasa basically is doing is, we spoke about these models and the way to manage the model, right? So Rasa X gives a way in which that can independently happen. Yeah? So now let me go to the browser and then let me try to use this URL that has given. I mean, the Rasa chatbot is deployed on a AWS box, and I think it's a DigitalOcean box, yeah. And so I want to link to that, so I just connected to it. And then you see that it gives me a way in which I can converse with it. Yeah? So this is for my testing activities. Yeah? So some manual testing that I need to do. Yeah? So I was talking about the continuous integration and the continuous development differs in a chatbot, right? So this is how it differs there. And then if I come to these models of it, now check this out. It basically has given me two different models. Yeah? So now I should be able to choose any of the model, so make them as active, so whichever was there. So here Rasa X, when you run Rasa X, it always takes whatever you have configured as active. Yeah? But Rasa has a different shell mode. Yeah? If you run for your testing, yeah? If you run that in the shell mode, then it always picks the latest one that is there. So here I just shifted it from one to the other. So you see that I have made one of the models active there. And then I can have a conversation with the bot. And what happens is, so this is how I am testing my bot manually. We'll go to the other automated tester also. Yeah? So I just initiate some conversation there, and so something like this. Yeah? So maybe it understands and it doesn't understand. So it said that, okay, what movie do you want to figure out? And then there is, excuse me, and then there is some kind of a story that is generated. Now, once, so people in your organization have already used this. So whoever is tasked with monitoring this, there will definitely be some kind of a business user available. So they will come to this conversation and they will be able to, this is recorded. So this conversation is recorded. Basically, I can take this and I can share it with you, and then even you will be able to strike a conversation, and I will be able to watch how the conversation went there. So this conversation is recorded, and then the conversation has already happened. Yeah? So this can be used for quality check in the sense that, see here, so Rasa X gives me ways in which I can mark this as incorrect intent, or I can edit it. I can say that somebody asked for a poster. So it identified this intent as somebody is asking for it, and the intent accuracy is 89%. Actually, it is correct. But what I want to show here is, maybe you want to come here and say that, no, the user is trying to tell you a goodbye. He is not asking for a movie. Yeah? So now what are you doing? You are basically now taking the conversation, figuring out a wrong conversation, and correcting the actual intent the user had. And then you can save this to training data. And the data that you saw there, the JSON data, so that gets changed. That gets added up here. Okay, so that is one activity. And then now, so we were also talking about, are there tools which will help me to create the training data? Yes, Rasa X itself will give that tool, wherein you can create a training data. You can say something like, show me a poster, and I can say that if somebody asks this, he's asking for a poster, and then I can save it. So I can keep creating a lot of training data. Of course, it has a lot more advanced things about, I can also do regex lookups and synonyms and things like that. But at that point, we're actually delving deep into Rasa there. Okay. So now that is good. And then, so this basically is how the model got created. So this is the policy, and this is the pipeline that it has. So it used memoization policy and Keras policy, basically different machine learning text-based algorithms which are coming together. And epochs are basically the number of iterations a machine learning model will take before it arrives at creation of a model. Yeah? So this is also configurable. You can configure this in the code also. So it has exposed these things. So the tools to training are available in the model itself. Yeah? And once you have trained it, either you can click train here, but maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I know that I have some kind of a CI/CD system, and I can trigger the Rasa train command that I used a little while ago, and I can trigger that command, and then the model, and then the training gets triggered there. Okay, so cool. So this is.
Sorry to interrupt you. We just have around 15 minutes to wrap up the session.
Okay, so thanks for the.
Also, there are a couple of questions.
Okay, I'll pick it. So would there be any overlap in intents by adding queries? If else, yes. So there will be overlap in intents, and this will also come out when we ask it to test the NLU. So I will show that command. So if there are overlapping intents and if there is a confusion between those intents, the test command will basically throw that up. There's one more question which says, with GitHub code, can we run this GUI client conversation you are running now? Yes, yeah, we can run that. This GUI conversation basically got enabled because I ran the command called as Rasa X. So Rasa X is given by Rasa. If I just run the command Rasa shell, then it becomes a shell mode, and I'm just checking here, not as oops. Right. Okay, so something happened. I think. Hello, Amrita, is my voice audible? Am I audible?
Yes, Aditya, okay. You're audible. Can go ahead.
I lost a pretty connection, so I thought I lost the connection.
Okay, yeah.
Give me a second there. I'm just logging into that system. Okay, so I have, I re-logged in. I lost the connection there. I don't know what happened. So that's my Conda environment. And if I go to so now this command test NLU is the command given by Rasa itself, and then this helps me to test the NLU, and then there I'll mark out a couple of areas there. So let that trigger. Yep. Now look at this. So there was a question about how do we know if there are overlapping intent and if it was not properly figured out. Yeah. So now if you look at this, now it shows that there is an incorrect intent prediction, and then there is this intent errors.json. So if we look at that JSON data, it will basically tell me what I had lost there. Yeah, so show me a poster, the new data that we added, right? So the intent prediction was goodbye and it was wrong, right? So that's why it got confused there, and it is warning me that whatever you did there was wrong. Yeah. So this test basically helps us to figure out what intents have been wrong, and then it also tells there is an entity extraction that happens. One is the intent, whether it was correct, and the second is the entity extraction. So this is good. And then there is also one more thing which says, yeah. So this is about figuring out whether your intents worked or not. But along with it, you also have something called as cross-validation. So in this cross-validation, this is where it basically tests your model with the previous model that is already available. We can also choose different versions of it, but by default, it picks the previous, and then it gives you back with some accuracy scores. This is very, very interesting, actually. Yeah. So people who have worked with classification algorithms and people who have worked with any ML algorithms, right? So you know the meaning of accuracy, F1 scores, and precisions. Basically, if you look at it, all that it is doing is intent classification. It's a basic classification algorithm. So that means that you can apply the same machine learning metrics of accuracy, F1 scores, and precisions on it. So now you see that it is giving you the intent evaluation. So the previous one had an accuracy of 1. And because I introduced a wrong intent, you see that the accuracy dropped down to 0.887 because I put in a wrong entity. Similarly, I mean, while showing the demo, I added one which was the correct entity and still I made it as a wrong entity, right? So that's why here the accuracy reduced here. So this is a very good, there was a couple of questions against this. So this becomes a good indication of whether you have really worked well. I mean, here the example is very made up example, and that's why you have an accuracy of 1. Okay? But once you start building bigger systems and once you start having a lot of conversation, the accuracy won't always be 1. Yeah? So it will be any good accuracy. It depends on how big your domain is, but anywhere between 80 to 90 is a good one. 90 plus is a very good accuracy there. Yeah? So all you do is you basically benchmark against the previous one. Yeah? So you cannot write a prediction algorithm which predicts the toss of the coin 100% of the time, right? So then there is no fun in tossing the coin. You always get it right. So you'll always try to better yourself, and that's where this comparison will basically help. So two things, you're comparing the intent and you're comparing the entity. Yeah? And also along with it, it also ran all the test cases that we had, and then it did not figure out any problems with the test case, and then it proceeded with the test case that were there in the stories.md. It was based on that it was able to arrive at an entity classification like this. So this becomes an important measure before you say whether you want to promote this model. In Rasa X, we told whether we have to promote or not. So you can decide whether you want to promote this model or not. Yeah? So now, coming back to this, now the way you tie all these things together would be, so now these are the different steps that are required. Now you go ahead and put it in any kind of CI/CD system, and you would have actually helped that happen. Yeah? So if it were to be Jenkins, then you would say you would install Jenkins, pull code from that, train the data. So I use that command which says Rasa train. So give that command in Jenkins. I mean, Jenkins that way doesn't do anything much except what all commands you give. And then you run your tests. And if the tests cross a certain threshold and you're happy with it, then you run your action server, and then you run your Rasa X. And then, so a very important differentiation I want to bring here about managing your CI/CD of the chatbot versus the training data. Yeah? Until this point, until Rasa X, it helps you to manage the CI/CD of the chatbot system, the conversation system, whether the conversations are correct with test or not. But the next two things, capture the correct conversation, choose active NLU models. So they happen as a part of the chatbot framework that is available to you. And that would be the same Rasa X thing that I showed, wherein we were able to see the models, train some data automatically, tools to train the data, tools to choose a specific model. Of course, Rasa gives a lot of APIs so that you can call those APIs automatically, but then on an ongoing correction mode, on an ongoing maintenance mode, so you would still need to enable the capture of these correct conversations and choose active NLU models. Okay, so let me see, there are a few questions there. So I think I answered the first two with GitHub code and overlapping intents. And then, so we use knowledge corpus for machine learning, for example, prediction, recommendation, and forecast. Yes. So for recommendations, it would still be the same thing. So one of the projects that I told that we are currently working for the implementation of Rasa chatbot is basically on a recommendation. There is a huge knowledge corpus. So we are structuring that knowledge. We are building some recommendation algorithm on the top of it, and then using that recommendation when somebody tries to have a conversation with the bot there. Yes. So, so I mean, just to elaborate a little bit on that, a leading question would be, so I showed you that actions.py, right? So that will be the hook. So you basically package your machine learning prediction or algorithm in a service of its own. Use the actions.py, create an action which basically calls this service, gets back the data, and then shows it. Keep the actual chatbot as light as possible. So everything else, all this domain knowledge, all these proprietary ML things should run on a different server of its own. There is one more question. Is there any way to tweak internals of NLU in case we need to check the behavioral change with the same? Yes. So an important question there. So that is, can we change the behavior of the way the NLU is working? Definitely yes. So now here somewhere I told about this configuration, right? So right now, the current NLU is working the way it is working because of this kind of a pipeline. But there are multiple such pipelines available. We can basically pick and choose different pipelines together and then build our own behavior of NLU. For that matter, in Rasa, you can create your own. Say, for example, your data science team or you have come up with a very good way to analyze particular word strings, right? So then you have written your own policy. Then you can also put your own policy here. This is basically a pipeline, yeah? So it executes this, it executes this, it takes this many number of iterations. So I can have 10 such things. I can have 20 such things there. So this is how you modify the behavior of how the NLU itself is behaving. So for most of the common use cases, Rasa itself has a lot of it packaged. But if there are specific use cases, then yes, we'll have to come here and change this conversation to make that happen. Cool. Okay. Yeah, hopefully that answers the question. Any follow-up questions are also welcome. Okay. So now we are almost, I mean, we took Q&A throughout this. We are almost towards the end of it there. So create clear segregation of the below. That's how you can basically, this was the fault lines we called. That's how you can basically design different CI/CDs for different aspects of the chatbot. There is no one silver bullet which says, this is the pipeline I will follow and this takes care of the whole chatbot. No, you have a different CI/CD for your application, for training data set, for your NLU models, the way you test the NLU models. Your business actions will be kept somewhere else. And then you write chatbot specific test cases where you are expecting the test case to work. And you use these test cases to figure out the accuracy between two different models. And that will act as a go, no go, or that will act as the way you can promote your models to the next level there. Yeah. And to make this happen, you can basically use any of the integration tool to link all these steps together there. So this kind of brings me to the end of the 1 hour that we have allocated for this. And I'm also at the end of the slide content that I had that I wanted to present in this discussion there. So any follow-up questions or this or any further questions are definitely welcome on the top of it. So throughout the session, there were a lot of questions that came in, and thanks a lot for that interaction, live interaction there. And apart from this, I also want to make an appeal to this forum in the sense that, so this is a technology forum which is basically focused around ML, ML Ops, and enterprise ML. So we would be sharing multiple such sessions. They can be small blog articles, small bits of videos, small POCs, or even webinars, or even hands-on sessions, the way the request is. And then I would also request the attendees of this session to volunteer to share your knowledge and experience with this group. We can create that platform there, and also contribute in the discussions and the events that we have. And more importantly, you can also request for sessions. Say, for example, your org is already trying to do something like this, and I want to basically know, picking up on a couple of questions that are there, I want to know how do you link a knowledge corpus with the prediction algorithm, with the chatbot. Can we have a quick demo? Can we have a webinar about it? So we can entertain those kind of things also. So I encourage you all to be actively participant in this, and hopefully this 1 hour that we have spent is useful to you, and it has added to your understanding of things there. So I can take further questions, or if not, we can call it a day there. So Amrita, do you want to take over?
Yeah. So thanks, Aditya, for the interesting session. And I thank every one of you for taking your time out to attend this session. Hope this was informative for you all. And please follow us on LinkedIn and watch the YouTube videos posted by us for more technical topics. See you all in the next session. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.